Now, for last week, about 49 African leaders, as well as the head of African Union Commission, were in Washington, D.C. for the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit 2022, which held specifically between the 13th and the 15th of December, and was hosted by President Joe Biden to demonstrate the United States' commitment to improving ties with Africa.
Now, the summit focused on issues relating to health, climate change, food security, conflicts, and cooperation in space. African leaders used the summit to seek more pragmatic ways in fostering new economic frontiers. And they also held discussions on peace and security, good governance, as well as the reinforcement of commitment to democracy, human rights, and global health security.
Now, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari was a key figure at the, summit, and of course, the summit that seek to sort of, find a, it was a week-long engagement, I must say, that had, that was aimed towards strengthening cooperation with the United States on various economic and diplomatic fronts. Kinsley.
That's right, Nadabo. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari used the summit occasion to make a strong case for financial and technical support from the U.S. towards achieving Nigeria's energy transition plan in order to ultimately eliminate the use of petrol and diesel generators by year 2060. Now, President Buhari indicated that $10 billion investment per annum will be required to achieve that objective.
And while speaking at the United States Nigeria Business and Investment Forum in Washington, D.C., President Buhari quoted American investors, asserting that Nigeria remains the best destination for American investors to put their money, considering various incentives and policies put in place by the Nigerian government to make the country a destination of choice for investment.
Now, the Nigerian president was also at the U.S. Institute of Peace in Washington, D.C., where he reiterated his desire to ensure peaceful general elections in Nigeria in 2023. And that INEC, as electoral umpire, has no reason whatsoever not to conduct the elections in line with the prescriptions of the Nigerian Constitution, the Electoral Act, and other subsidiary legislation. Now, on his part, U.S. President Joe Biden, at the strategic meeting with leaders of 6 African countries, expressed confidence in the ability of President Buhari to supervise the conduct of free, fair, and credible elections in 2023, applauding the president's high sense of commitment to constitutional democracy in Nigeria. Nadabo.
And America's Joe Biden, while addressing the U.S. Africa Business Forum, equally announced a $350 billion investment package tagged Digital Transformation with Africa initiative aimed at ensuring that people across the continent participate actively in digital economy.
All right, now there was also an indication from the U.S. leader of a possible visit to Africa, in addition to, of course, a pledge of $55 billion to assist the continent, especially in economy and food security. Of course, as we know, other world powers, including China, will be keeping a close watch as the U.S. now woos African countries.
Now, with so much advances and commitments to Africa from the United States, what is in it that is for Nigeria, and how can Nigeria maximize ties with the United States for shared prosperity? We shall take up the issues with guests as we review the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit on the program today. My name is Yusuf Nadabu Suman, welcoming you to Good Morning Nigeria.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I heartily welcome my colleague back on set and to also congratulate him to our viewers. Today, my colleague Yusuf Nadabu is officially admitted onto the 6th floor of life. Welcome to the Diamond Club, Nadabu. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you so very much, Kesley. At least it's a thing of joy to be up there at the 6th floor, hale and happy, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. To be on your 2 feet and, still, as it were, delivering service to fatherland. Congratulations. You've also had a sterling career in the Nigerian Television Authority, Committee, holding various managerial positions in the course of your illustrious career. So, Honorable, congratulations
Thank you
on
so very
behalf
much, and
of
of course,
all of us.
thank you so much, and of course, this is going to be my last official staffing participation on Good Morning Nigeria.
That's right.
As permanent and pensionable staff, really, I must say,
Yes.
it all depends on what time will bring henceforth as we move into other spheres of life.
Absolutely, absolutely. We wish you the very best as we go on. It's been a lovely time co-presenting Good Morning Nigeria with you as a staff of the Nigerian Television Authority. So, Yusuf Nadabo Usman, 60 today. Congratulations. It's Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As always, we're broadcasting from our Abuja headquarters studios. In the course of the program, we have our complimentary segments, newspaper review and business.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and of course, it's a prompt for our conversation, which is to review the just concluded U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. Here is a background report put together by correspondent Joseph Watson.
Washington, D.C. hosted not less than 50 leaders from African countries, with Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari a key figure. The occasion was the United States Africa Leadership Summit 2022, aimed at rekindling ties between the U.S. and the African continent in areas of security, climate change, innovations, trade and investment, as well as good governance with strong democratic institutions. One of the outcomes of the strategic engagements was an elected president of the United States of America, Joe Biden, declaring the desire of his country to commit $55 billion to advance development in Africa in the next 3 years.
$55 billion in Africa to advance the priorities we share and to support the Agenda 2063. That number represents a comprehensive commitment from the United States to invest in Africa's people, Africa's infrastructure, Africa's agriculture, Africa's health system, Africa's security, and more.
The U.S. believes Africa is a home to tremendous mineral resources, to power technology, to the private sector industry that will create opportunities for millions globally. For Africa, it was not just looking forward for technical support, but robust collaboration in advancing multidimensional approach to tackling climate change, terrorism, transnational organized crimes, and unconstitutional change of power in parts of the region, which Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari says is impacting negatively on the continent.
A secured and stable Nigeria is indispensable for overall peace and prosperity of not only the country but Africa, with huge implications for global peace and stability.
The United States looks forward to the African Union joining the G20 as permanent member and announced its full support to reforming the UN Security Council to include permanent representation for Africa. China's influence in the continent is growing stronger in the last years, and many international analysts see it as a major competitor to the West. For Nigeria, it was another opportunity to reaffirm itself as a leader in the continent, championing democracy and socio-economic development. What are the gains of the summit for Nigeria and Africa? Guests on the program will provide perspectives shortly.
And with us in the studios here, I would like to welcome Malam Garba Shehu, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity. He's back from the U.S., where he was with the President and the rest of the delegation at the summit. Malam Garba Shehu, we're glad to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, always.
Okay. Also here with us in the studio, Dr. Adoti Matthew O'Malley, Head of Department, International Relations and Diplomacy at Base University, also here in the nation's capital. Dr. O'Malley, glad to have you this morning.
Good morning.
Okay. All right.
And joining us via Zoom from Atlanta, that is in the United States, is Ambassador Dawda Danladi, former Nigerian High Commissioner to Pakistan. Ambassador, thank you for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you and good morning.
Thank you.
Okay, Ambassador Danladi, we're glad to have you with us this morning. I'm not quite sure what is there beside beside you on your right-hand side, is it a maze or your symbol, your symbol, your symbol of authority?
It looks like a
All
maze
right,
anyway.
so yeah, that's right. Okay, always a delight having Ambassador Don Ladi, of course, Nigeria's former High Commissioner to Pakistan and Foreign Affairs analyst. Let's begin with Malam Garba Shehu, who was an eyewitness to the series of events in the course of that summit. Malam Garba Shehu, tell us, was it time well spent?
Oh, exceedingly so. So much was done, so much achieved. You can classify them as, the tangibles and the intangibles. Talking about the intangibles, we've been speaking about, how much mileage the president himself as a person has gained, gaining this enormous recognition from, Biden himself, recognition that the president is a role model for the rest of Africa. And simply because of the way he's doing things, issues of good governance, being democratic, promoting democracy at home and in the sub-region, and in a way recognized by the American leader as the champion of democracy on the continent. It's clear from the interaction between the two of them that they came out as being on the same page on key matters of democracy, war against terrorism, matters of good governance, human rights, and all of that. Strategically, this is very important for Nigeria now and even for the future, not minding the fact that the president has just a few months to go. So we're talking about laying a frame of foundation that whoever comes after him would certainly be building on this enormous goodwill that has been generated. Beside the strategic significance of the interaction and the understanding, this report just indicated, for instance, that Americans are working towards getting Africa on the table of the G12, G19, developed European and developed countries. It's important that at this time we are on the same page with them, as I said, on key issues of the day, particularly democracy, for which America is the global champion. So if a decision is to be made in this regard, and we enjoy this kind of excellent terms between ourselves, it then means that Nigeria is, in most likelihood, be the obvious choice for America. And our view is that G12 can only be a stepping stone, because there is also the G7. In fact, there is also the permanent seat on the UN Security Council. So this really gives us a good outlook for emergence, in all of these important fora. Besides this, the president did meet businesses. He was at the U.S. Institute of Peace. He started from there, 2015, when he laid out his vision for the country. And as he said in his speech, now that the curtains are being drawn on his own, it was also an opportune moment for him to have gone there, speak to the world, and say, this is how far we have come. Business meetings, as I said, were held. Signatures were signed onto some agreements, including the important one on renewable energy. Pen has been put to paper on American funding up to $10 billion US for a 5,000 megawatt, electricity, solar generated electricity that is going to be, that will feed about 15 of the country states and the FCT, and as therefore keying into the government's energy transition plan, which the president also had the opportunity to converse, sufficiently for, and getting, as I say, as support also from the U.S. government. It's important that this moment has been well used, to speak about this country's energy transition plans and the fact that we need support for the fossil fuels that we have, oil and the gas, which the Europeans and developed countries are turning back there too. They're turning their back to, as a matter of fact, advising their banks, to stop funding, which is, of course, very hypocritical, given that when they are pressured by the needs of the moment, pressures coming from energy scarcity arising from Ukraine, Russia, for instance, they're all going back to the dirtiest, of fuels, which is coal. So it would appear, I guess, from these interactions that the consensus is evolving between our country and the United States for their critical support for Nigeria's transition energy plan that relies heavily on gas. There's, I believe, more to talk about.
Yeah, that would be really, because we'll look into the details much later as we progress in the program. Thank you so much, Garbashew, and welcome back. Omale, let's have your take on the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. Of course, Garbashew gave us an overview as an insider, somebody who saw most of it and then maybe participated in a lot of other discussions there. Let's have your take on this very important, summit. And then what were the silent issues there, and what really were there for Africa and indeed specifically for Nigeria?
Yes, this summit is very, very important. Very important against the background that the last time similar summit held was eight years ago under the Obama regime. And under Trump, a lot of mileage was lost, especially in the U.S.-Africa relationship, because of Trump's way of handling foreign policy. With the coming of Biden, America needs to close that gap that existed, because after 8 years of similar summit holding, there is urgent need for the Americans to match the growing influence of China and Russia within the African continent. And so this summit is very, very important. Summits have always been used in international relations, especially to harness partnership and to bring together integration and of countries within the world. So it's not new. Summits of similar nature has been held. We recollect that the EU held EU-African Summit. China also had similar summits with African leaders. So it underscored the importance of Africa in global politics. Africa is becoming more and more relevant within the international system because of the enormity of raw materials, the enormous human resources that we have in Africa. So to me, the summit has come at a very good time, and Africa must take opportunity of this summit to press home its demand, especially on the developed countries, the G8, to continue to partner with Africa, especially, as he has said, in area of renewable energy and other key areas like human rights, which we still have challenges, terrorism and insecurity, and bringing it back home to us here in Nigeria. We share a historic link with the U.S., and we have had a very robust relationship. So seeing our president having a one-on-one personal diplomacy with Biden, to me, was a very, very good strategic move by Mr. President, because we cannot just wash away America from our affairs because of the strategic role the U.S. plays. Don't forget that programs like the AFRICOM, AFTA, and others are still ongoing. Under the Clinton regime, we have the African Growth and Opportunity Act, and several policies that the U.S. has put in place to support African countries. I'm one of those that have always criticized our dependence on foreign loans and foreign aids. But in the world of the 21st century, you can't do away with this foreign support because we have a lot of deficit in terms of infrastructure. We need to improve our roads, we need to improve our electricity, we need to improve our medical facilities and so on and so forth. So the funds are not there. So it is this type of partnership, voting a whopping 55 billion over the next 3 years by the US, which is one of the fallout of this summit, is very, very heartwarming to me as a scholar on international relations, because we need this foreign intervention in key critical sectors of the economy to be able to come out of our underdeveloped status. And also, I think our businessmen and entrepreneurs should key into this type of arrangement that our president has met with the president of the United States, and like Garba Shehu talk about the business forum. We desire this foreign direct investment to create employment for our teeming non-employed youth, and I think it's a very good move by Mr. President to have engaged with the American business community. We, in the area of power, like Garba Shehu pointed out, yes, we are transiting, and this transition can be facilitated better. We have a lot of solar sunshine here in this part of the world. We have wind and so on. So we have to leverage on these natural resources that we have, and there's no better opportunity to push this than at the floor of this kind of summit.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. O'Malley, there for your intervention. Let's go over now to Ambassador Dauda Danladi, who is with us via Zoom from Atlanta in the U.S. Ambassador Danladi, on the heels of this summit, can we say that Africa is back on the radar of the United States as a foreign policy priority after the Trump years?
Well, this is a very crucial question, and I think I will start by saying that it is a new scramble for Africa. This summit, organized by the United States, is a well-calculated, recalibrated diplomatic strategy to counter the growing influence of China and Russia in the African continent. Yes, in the past, the United States has promoted democracy in the African continent. To a large extent, African countries have internalized the principles of democracy, and we now have flourishing multi-party democracy in Africa. Yes, the United States is the largest humanitarian contributor to the African continent. But I think over the years, they concentrated on the issue of peace and security. Yes, it has culminated in the establishment of the African High Command, though it was stationed in Germany. But if you make comparative analysis, the United States, for example, in Afghanistan, over the past 20 years, have spent a whopping sum of $2.3 trillion. Right now in Ukraine, the United States has already spent about 68 billion. And recently, during the budget for 2023, they made a submission to the Congress for the sum of 37.7 billion. Now you can see the concentration of the United States in combating global terrorism, which really appears over the years, they seem to have lost focus on Africa. Now, this has paved the way for China. China today has over 10,000 companies operating in 33 African countries. Their investment portfolio is about $260 billion. In fact, if you add AIDS and humanitarian assistance, you are looking at over 700 billion. In the case of Russia, you can see that Russia is expanding its influence also on the African continent. Russia is in Mali supporting the Goita regime. Russia is in Central African Republic, the Wagner Group, security outfit that is assisting to stabilize the Central African Republic. They're expanding their influence into the DRC as well as Gabon. In Burkina Faso, they are also there. In Libya, they have established they have made great impact so that they can have influence in the Sahel region. And when you come to Sudan, they are supporting the military junta in Sudan so that they can have access to the Red Sea. If they establish a naval base, for example, in the port of Sudan, they will have access to the Red Sea. So these are the challenges that have really, to my understanding, prompted the US to come out with a strategy reassuring the African continent that they can partner with the African continent so that they can regain the lost space as a result of their concentration in fighting global terrorism. So the way I look at it is, yes, we have challenges in Africa, but America knows, houses 30% of all non-mineral deposits in the world. Africa has 90% of cobalt deposit in the world, which is critical to the tech and the auto industries. Africa houses over 40% of gold deposit, and therefore they know going forward that they have to bring Africa back on the table. And I am glad that what they are bringing on the table this time around, I do hope that it will lead to specific deliverables so that at the end of the day, the required impact will be achieved. You see, let me just quickly say this, that if you make comparison with when China invited African heads of state, they sent in advance agendas, programs, areas for discussions. And the African heads of state had the opportunity to make inputs, to make observations, and specific outcomes were already outlined. So, but the US scenario seems to be that, yes, they put the policies, they put the programs, and the African heads of government will now have to strategize to see how they can leverage on this input to make progress.
Okay, thank you so much, Ambassador Dauda Danladi. You raised some, valid, issues there that needs interrogation as we progress. Most especially talking about the scramble for Africa, and of course how the world is looking at that. Africa has become a darling of the world. Garuba Shehu. Russia, China, France, US, and all other powers are just looking towards Africa, just like Biden said at this very, just concluded a summit. Africa, the success of the world is the success. The success of Africa is the success of the world. And of course, US wants to key into that. But this is not the first one. That's not going to be the last one for sure. Buhari was there in 2015 at that same one, as being pointed out earlier on. And between 2015 and now, then we would say our president put forward the agenda of his administration in 2015. And then by this year, after this very summit, he summarily explained and put forward what he was able to achieve. But my concern is, on the tangibles of U.S. Africa Leaders Summit between 2015 and 2022. What were we able to make out of it, and how are we looking at, U.S. interest in Africa, especially in Nigeria?
Well, there's a convergence, on many trajectories. And one specific one I will take is on the matter of security. Of all the things that the ambassador has himself said, I think that even, and to some extent, Dr. Umali, even the Trump era is not, for this purpose, a lost segment of, the entire, spectrum of Africa. Because, yes, Obama came, we were there 2015, and he made it clear to President Buhari then and said, well, here I am. I have just a few months to go. Take advantage of what you can. And I think that at that time, the priorities of the Buhari administration were that we needed America to even open up, because they had closed their doors to Nigeria in so many respects. At a time when we had inherited a big war, in the northeast, the Boko Haram terrorism, and the incursions by ISWAP, supported from some other parts of the world. We needed weapons. We needed all of that support, intelligence, and simply, as I said, Americans had shut their doors against us then. This had changed significantly from then to now. And when I said the thing about the Reagan era, don't forget that Obama didn't give us the Super Tucanos, for instance, arising from, concerns of the Healy law, they said, human rights and all of that. And in one telephone call, Trump just called President Buhari and said, you want to buy this aircraft? Can you pay within a month? And President Buhari made good, paid all of the money. And here we are today, and these things are game changers. So we have moved on, and this thing about the 55 billion, it might look small to, given experiences, Afghanistan, as have just been cited by Ambassador, but it's a basket. And so whoever makes the most effort will get as much as they can from this. And my sense is that under the present dispensation in the country, we have very serious people, running especially matters of, climate change, environment, power. I'm not, again, being accusatory of blame, that corruption that had scared away Americans from, putting in money here on a grand scale has diminished significantly in this country. And I'm optimistic that we'll have a blueprint, we'll lay it before them, and when they monitor implementation, as they are likely to, because they have appointed, which is also very important, a former Assistant Secretary of State, Johnny Carson. He is now the points person for the implementation of all of these programs, agreements that have been reached. While some other countries may be thinking of how they can take this money and pocket it, the circumstances in Nigeria are different, and I have a sense that we will get this money and we'll put it to good use.
Okay, Bashir, I still want to stay with you. Nadabo and Dr. Male have drawn attention to the fact that this is not the first of such, well, this is not exactly, well, in a sense it's multilateral, but it's also almost bilateral. Mm-hmm. Multilateral will involve a number of entities, mm-hmm. but this one appears to be one entity, one big man, or big country, inviting a host of other African countries. Mm-hmm. This is not the first time it's happening. Mm-hmm. India has been part of that. Mm-hmm. China has been part of that. Russia has also been part of that. The EU, part of it, and I think the Japanese.
Japan also.
The Japanese, they've also, and we've had opportunity on Good Morning Nigeria.
And Turkey as well.
Turkey, of interacting with you or your colleague, Femi Additional, who accompanied the president to these summits. And then the summit in Russia was in Sochi, I believe. Yeah, Sochi, which was one of the venues of the World Cup that they hosted 4 years ago. What do you make of it? I will speak like a journalist now. What do you make of these interactions? We also had one, for instance, with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia. I remember out of that Saudi meeting, there were pledges about Aramco and taking advantage of how Aramco has been run as a profitable oil and gas company, XYZ, and they will be interested in helping fix our refineries. The contract went to an Italian firm. We also heard about the Russians. Oh, now there will be commitment to Ajaokuta. That commitment is not gotten off the table. What do you make of these interactions? And what, I don't want to use the word, say, which one would you consider in terms of seriousness to say, look, fly with this, even though there is a scramble for the continent, this is where we think that we should pitch our tent. What have you made of all of these interactions?
Well, this country is faced with so many challenges. And in particular, you know, we have come short over the years in provision of infrastructure. And that infrastructure gap, you know, has been a major preoccupation for the Muhammadu Buhari administration since it came into office. And without all of these commitments that we're talking about, we would not have been where we are today when you're dealing with railway, you're dealing with the roads and bridges and even power. And matters of climate change, agriculture, you know, so much support has come, one or the other, from some of these countries. And in some of these instances, yes, there were challenges that we had faced, and not arising from the failure of governance or the fact that the foreign collaborators are unwilling to come along with us. There are some problems we also create for ourselves. I'm happy you mentioned Ajaokuta. And you know that the Russians had said they will come and take over, they will do it all over again, and they will put it into. Up to today, we are in court over this Ajaokuta. And they were in court not because, but it is Nigerians who are suing, not the foreigners who are undermining these things. We had, look at Mambila, for instance, power. The Qataris said, Qataris have the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world. And they said to President Buhari, between you and I, the president, the emir said, how much do you want? And President said, we'll determine this. When he came back, he wrote a request for 6 billion to do Mambila. And the Qataris looked at it and said, is this all you want? Because there are so much, and they said other countries from all over are coming from, you know, as we speak today, it's only a few weeks ago, because a Nigerian pretended that he had a contract which is non-existent, and had taken this country to international tribunal and stalled Ajaokuta. It's only in the dying days of the administration that this...
No, they stalled Mambila.
They stalled Mambila. Yeah. They've stalled it. And simply out of nothing but greed, because you don't have a signed contract. But because you can hire lawyers and go to court, you won't take 200 million US gratis, US dollars, for nothing.
The same thing with P and ID.
So this is the kind of thing that we face. So, but in terms of everything we're talking about, I mean, look at how much relief the country has gained with the use by the second Niger bridge by Nigerians commencing this week itself. It's a big relief for us, and everybody is celebrating this irrespective of political party affiliation. And there are so many of these projects, more than 20,000 kilometers of road networks, much of it funded from abroad. So we're getting somewhere. It's not as if nothing is coming to us.
Yeah, Nada, but you want to throw the next question. But I think that you're not the Attorney General of the Federation. We've had him on Good Morning Nigeria a couple of times. Sometimes I just ask myself, who is the custodian of all these agreements, all these contracts that are signed? Who vets them? Ordinarily, there should be recourse to the federal, if it's a federal government contract, to the Federal Ministry of Justice to vet them. And the next thing you just see, you are served with papers and I don't know, another book. It's worrisome.
Really, it's worrisome.
And then when they are making claims of arbitration, you start debating because there is a time limit that is set for the conclusion of arbitration. Sometimes we don't get to be served. Sometimes we are served with neglect to enter appearance. And then the arbitrators enter a judgment and they go for registration. As I said, for work not done, you are asking for 200 million US dollars. And there are people who are behind all of these camps.
Well, I think, Kingsley, Buhari has tried as much as he could in trying to, nub some of these things in the bud. Looking at some examples like the Electoral Act and some other issues that he was able to at least put down. Even the, the Naira, thing that is taking place at the moment is one of the things he's doing in order to get these ones done. I think he's going to do that one too, at least in the next 3 or 4 months before he leaves, having to open up these contracts, look at them properly, and then untie the tied notes, and then so that we can move forward. Those giving us these assistance and loans will not be happy with this kind of. I mean, imagine a situation in Qatar saying, is that the only thing you need? Can't you have more? And look at what's happening by.
So Qatar makes you the offer, and you find that there is litigation on the job.
By us still,
Back. China Exim is holding back on so many of these other things, because once there is that, when somebody flags litigation, they will hold back.
Yeah,
sure,
that's why.
natural.
But that's why. I mean, it's an interaction we hope to have with the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice. Can we take a look at our books and say where is litigation? Yes, where is litigation? Because it was also something similar that happened with regard to our international obligations to a number of international institutions. Because officials just go. We are usually the first to sign. And when you sign, there are subscription obligations. I recall some years ago,
and you don't pay.
It was raised that Nigeria was owing, I can't remember the exact amount, running to millions of US dollars. Unpaid subscriptions and other obligations. For a while now, we haven't heard much about that. But there are persons who just sign these things. All right.
Anyway, let's go over to Ambassador David Nladi at least for a while, and then hear some more about what you said as the scramble for Africa. Let's get back to that and then say, the darling is African. Of course, we have a lot of resources, human and natural. And then these are what the world is looking at. And these countries and organizations are just popping and trying to get us back. We were through with colonialism now. At least we're now looking at another neo-colonial, phase of existence as Africans. Tell us more about, the tangibles. I must insist on that because our viewers really want to know where the money is going to, having to go out and then, spend a week or 4 or 5 days out there with these countries and then coming back to Nigeria and then saying we've gotten this and that. Between 2015 and 2022, I'm throwing this question back to you again from Garba Shehu so that I can get your opinion on that. What do you think was very much tangible in addition to what Garba Shehu said, and how do we make good this very last summit?
Well, I think let me just speak on the collective effort by the African countries. You see, the establishment and the implementation of the African Continental Trade Area has really opened up the doors of opportunities for African countries. That singular act has, to a large extent, rekindled the spirit of Pan-Africanism that was started in the 60s to protect and to harness the resources of the African countries for African use. You see, with a collective GDP of about $3.4 trillion, of course it will be attractive. Again, coupled with our population. I think from what I understand is that the tangibles based on some of the agreements that have been signed. It is quite pleasing that I have seen or heard the agreements on the areas of transportation between some of the companies in the United States and countries like Benin, Togo, Mauritania, Gambia. So this is quite encouraging. And again, in the areas of human capital development, I can see the U.S. placing great emphasis on the development of the human capital, so that, because the future labor force definitely is going to come from Africa. Africa has a young population, and the advantages are there. And the areas of deepening of democratic institutions, I don't know if there is anything that is coming to one of the largest democracies in Africa, that's Nigeria, in the areas of tech that can strengthen and ensure a free and credible elections in Nigeria. If you want a free, fair elections, of course, you have to use technology. So I don't know if in that area, but it has been mentioned by the United States that part of the funds are there. So my worry is that there has been no pre-information on the policy thrust of the U.S. with respect to the African countries. African head of states were all summoned to the U.S., but the agenda, one would have loved if the agenda based on mutual respect to have been forwarded to the African countries in advance, so that they can have an input, identify critical areas that they need quick interventions, so that at the end of this summit, we will have, more robust deliverables that can impact on the socio-economic development of Africa.
Ambassador Dauda Danladi, I want to stay with you because you've raised the issue of a prior agenda agreed to by the meeting parties before the summit, so that African countries could have, or the participants otherwise could have identified their areas of priority, which leads me to a question around the whole idea of the renewed scramble for the continent. Namely, China has been praised, for instance, for focusing on infrastructure, because Africa suffers a dearth of critical infrastructure. And the U.S., as important as democracy is, as important as human rights issues are, we see little, whether from the EU or from the US, with regard to focus on critical infrastructure. So is the scramble not likely to continue, because now the accent will still be, well, we have thrown in the climate change issues and renewable energies and human rights and peace and security in the continent still ravaged by war and conflict. But the Chinese are still there, and once the environment is right, they continue with their infrastructure development. Ambassador.
Well, this is quite true because based on the UN survey, Africa needs about 150 billion US dollars annually for development of critical infrastructure. And yeah? Yes. What I'm saying is that based on the United Nations survey, Africa needs about 150 billion US dollars for development of infrastructure. And over the past few years, based on perceived issues of corruption, issues of transparency and accountability, some of the multilateral financial institutions were not keen in advancing soft loans to African countries. And that is where China came in. And China has made great impact in that direction. And that has sent an amber signal to the United States. It is my hope that this time around, based on the recalibration of diplomatic strategy by the United States to have a strong foothold on Africa, that they would rise up to the occasion. And of course, the African countries, based on what has been put on the table, I will expect that bureaucrats will assist the government in identifying and follow up on some of these finances that are put on the table, so that the country can benefit. But in a situation where you are summoned for a meeting, you do not have advanced agenda on various issues that will be discussed, then of course it will be again, the strategy would be based on the ability of bureaucrats to see how they can leverage on what has been put on the table to develop the various sectors that requires attention.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. That issue of having to call African leaders to the United States and, of course, put on the table for them, this is what we have, what do you make out of it, how do you key into it, how do you get your share of it? It's one difference of with the other summits they've been holding, I must say, with China, Russia, and of course even France. We'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll look at this issue of having to call, African leaders to a certain location somewhere, somehow, by a certain power in this world, and then say, here we are. What do you make out of this? Give us this and give us that. Garba is making some smiles here. Maybe when we come back, he will respond to that. It's Good Morning Nigeria. We are this morning reviewing the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit on Good Morning Nigeria. And before we went on break, we had, the ambassador talking about issues relating to how we'll be able to get the tangibles out from the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit. Matthew O'Malley, let's get your view on this. I just hinted a little bit about that, and that's talking about, calling leaders, our leaders, all right, to, some location somewhere around the world, and then saying, this is what we have. How do you key into this? In the case of the U.S., Africa Leaders Summit, some saying ahead of time, here's the agenda and here we are. This is what we have. What are your inputs and how do you make it? And in some other locations somewhere, some other leaders will say, just come, let's talk, and then see what we'll make out of the talking. Now, generally speaking, a lot of people have been making comments about this. Must we be called to somewhere in order to get something? Although we know it's a global village, and of course we should be part of this world. And if there are requests and invitations from somewhere, at least they are worth being, respected. What do you make out of this, especially the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit?
Yes, I think summits of this nature, like I said earlier, are not new or are not strange. I think it also shows the power that some of these countries that are extending this invitation want to wield within the international system. It's not easy for you to give invitation to 49, 50 presidents of a continent and move them in one full swoop to your country. So they also want to show the level of power, the level of acceptability that they have within the international system. Oh, China did it. Oh, Russia did it. So we, the Americans, we are doing it with even more finesse. So it sends a clear message that you are also a key factor or a key player within the international system. On whether it is right doing that, I don't think there's anything there. In international relations, summits of such nature, any opportunity that you have to meet and judge and discuss and negotiate is always appreciated. Don't forget that international relations and diplomacy is basically about negotiations. And if people like Hans Morgenthau said it, that international relations or diplomacy is negotiations. So bringing countries together under whatever platform is always acceptable within the international system. Now, one point I want to make is that we have been talking about infrastructure this morning. yes, China has invested a lot, as Ambassador has said, in developing countries. But we have other challenges outside infrastructure. Issue of poverty is very, very critical. Issues of some of the beliefs that we have in Africa. For example, genital female mutilations and some of these harmful practices that we are doing. So the United Nations, the EU, the Americans, and every other stakeholders within the international system, they are trying to help Africa to come out of these development challenges. Yes, infrastructure is very critical, but there are also other fundamental issues that Africa needs this type of partnership with the developed world to be able to come out of its predicament. We still have deficit of so many things outside infrastructure that still troubles us. Fundamentally, like I said, in the area of medicine, for example, we have not been able to leverage. Yesterday, before I came here, I saw that our bitter leaf has been turned around by one company in the US, and they have now in capsule, and they are now bringing it back to us.
It's been around for a while. You'll find it some of the upscale pharmacies in the
So
city.
we need to really build partnership across board. We have so many things that we as Africans can give to the world, and it is only through this type of summit that we can package our products and give to the rest of the world. Yes, if you look at it in another way, trade missions have been sponsored. Trade missions is one of the key areas of reaching out to the international community. So countries can sponsor trade missions. But at this stage, I think why they are talking to the presidents of African countries is to talk to them directly. Let them also key into these programs that the Americans and other countries in the developed world have for Africa. And if you see, our president used that opportunity to reassure the international community of Nigeria's commitment to democracy. And the president used that opportunity to assure the international community that, look, 2023 is knocking. And as I'm talking to you, our transition is going on smoothly, and we are going to have a successful change of baton. I think there's no other platform that he would have said that than this platform. And America being the champion of democracy, I think our president using that opportunity to reassure the international community was very instructive. So to me, the benefit of the conference or the summit, we can look at it from various angles. One, the president using it as an opportunity to assure the international community of Nigeria's commitment to democracy. Then the second point I want to stress is that with the conflict in the Sahel region, just like Garba Shewa talked about, the interest of foreign powers in domestic conflicts in Africa, the U.S. could use its intelligence machinery to help African countries to nip in the bud this festering crisis that is coming up. If you look at even the crisis with IPOB and all this, even within Nigeria, Boko Haram and so on, Nigeria will need the intelligence gathering mechanism of the US, the CIA and others to be able to checkmate the influence of other countries trying to encroach into Nigeria. So to me, to my mind, this summit is very, very important to Africa, to Nigeria particularly, because we need the US. They have the technology, they have the intelligence gathering mechanism, and like he said, when the president was called to come and take the Tucano jets and other equipment, you can see that the Boko Haram activity has gone down significantly. And you can see that the northeast is virtually now open for people to travel. I was surprised that somebody told me that he traveled by road all the way to Maiduguri, that there's no danger as it used to be. So a lot has been achieved, and it is through this equipment through this opportunity we can get this equipment to fight our domestic terrorists and also to fight terrorism across Africa. So the summit, to my mind, is very, very good for Africa. It's very good for Nigeria, and I think our president used that opportunity very well. And we hope that at the end of the day, when we begin to access these funds, just like Garba Shehu has said, Corruption that used to be one of the major reasons why some of these donor partners have been shying away. I think a lot has been achieved in that regard. If people see tangibly that they are giving you money and you are putting it into projects, and people can see the projects, and these projects are working, more foreign direct investment, more foreign aids will come in. I was just shocked that the issue of the Mambila Plateau, Mambila hydropower project, which the Qatar government was ready to bring money, and then our own litigation. Yeah, I think we have to use this opportunity like this, of this platform, to appeal to Nigerians. Some of these laudable projects, you can imagine the impact of the Mambila hydropower project. If it has been finished, you can imagine the number of megawatts of electricity that is going to contribute to the national grid to solve this our power problem. Because if we can solve power in Nigeria today, as it is, we would have solved a lot of problems.
Okay. Dr. Male, thank you very much for the points that you have raised. I want to come back to Malam Garba. Malam Garba, well, we, as a country, it's turning out that we make commitments abroad. We receive offers from abroad, but we develop clay feet when we come back home. In terms of little action, if sometimes even no action whatsoever, to take advantage of the offers and pledges that we have received, or even the commitments that we have made. Earlier, reference was made to AGOA. AGOA was a Clinton offer, the African Growth Opportunities Act. And while smaller African countries were taking advantage of that, to say like, this is a window of opportunity for you to export your products to the U.S., of course, we were scrambling, doing other things. I've heard so much now about renewables. I'm a bit, I hope that we have done our arithmetic right to be sure that the things that we are supposed to be doing at home, we are doing them. When you say renewables, take for instance, wind energy. Where have we installed the windmills to trap energy? Have we imported the windmills? There was a giant windmill that the late President Musa Yar'Adua was trying to install in Katsina while he was governor. He left that, of course, became president before he passed away. I don't know whether that is functioning. A number of states have been identified as sources of windmill. Solar panels are so expensive. Installing solar energy in your homes now is very expensive, and these guys are taking advantage of virtually everyone. So how do we overcome this scenario of, as I said, making commitments abroad, receiving pledges and offers, and then having little positive action at home to enable all of these commitments or pledges and offers to crystallize?
That's a tough question, because I think that some of these things also they're having to do with some inherent problems that we have, as a country do have. It's a very large and diverse country, and yeah, while government at the center is trying to pull everyone, onto the center, of course it is also present, as you can see, that as centripetal forces are also pulling us, apart. So it takes a lot of argument whether this project should be here or there, and then when it is done, are we all convinced that it should go there? So I believe that this is also having to some contribution to some of this without having to go into some further detail. You mentioned the windmill in Katsina, for instance, a very laudable project, but you know that it was specially targeted by terrorists, I believe, coming from across the border, vandalized the place and took hostages, from all of that. So the government has to go back to the drawing board. The Germans, I think they were the original, they pulled out. So we had to get another, contractor, and, vandalized equipment had to be. So it's on course. I believe that the minister visited about 2 months ago, and he has promised early commissioning for that project. So as I said, it's a difficult one because the president had seen this inherent problem and decided to set up the project monitoring unit in the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. it is possible then that digitally the SGF's office is able to monitor on a day-by-day basis projects that are ongoing. Maybe this may be coming a bit later in the life of the administration, but again, the government is not for one day, not for one month. Whatever we are able to do before we leave, others will come and build on this and ensure that we overcome these challenges that you have cited.
Okay, thank you so much, Garba. We must not end this program without talking about the U.S. President's trip to Africa. He just pointed towards that. We don't know when exactly. I don't know. Because I'm asking this against the background of the fact that Trump was here in Africa, but he didn't come to Nigeria. And then I'm afraid, I won't want to say that he won't come to Biden, but I think it's a more of a better relationship now than with the Trump in certain areas anyway. Do you see Nigeria being on the card of, the visit if he comes to Africa?
Oh, sure, because if you have to speak to Africa, you must talk to Nigeria. I mean, it's very clear from we are the ones to talk to. I mean, at this summit, although, Ambassador made a big issue of the fact that agenda was, the president of Nigeria knew well ahead that he was going to be speaking on peace and security for the entire continent. And the choice of Nigeria is itself significant because then we are the spokesperson, we are the spokesman for the entire continent. So unless they want to listen to some little gossip here and there, the real, spokesperson for Africa is Nigeria. And my sense is that if Mr. Biden will come, he will make the choice of being here.
Okay, thank you, Malam Garba Shehu. Let's get the closing thoughts also of Ambassador Dauda Danladi. Ambassador Dauda Danladi, I asked the question about how we can readily crystallize our commitments abroad and offers and pledges from well-meaning countries with more action at home.
Well, I think our bureaucrats must rise up to the occasion. Opportunities have been presented, and what is required is for us to strategize to see how we can cash in, leverage on the opportunities that have been presented. And let me quickly say this, that the success of our African Continental Free Trade Area to a large extent will also depend on the provision of infrastructure, physical infrastructure, roads, seaports, security, communication, internet services. And I'm glad that during the presentation by the US President, he specifically mentioned that already an MOU has been signed with the African Continental Free Trade Area. And it is my hope that they would provide the required necessary support, so that the implementation will be successful and it will impact on the development of Africa generally.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Dauda Danladi, Nigeria's former High Commissioner to Pakistan. You joined us via Zoom this morning from Atlanta in the United States. We appreciate the fact that these are still small hours in the U.S., probably just close to 3 a.m., I believe, in that part of the U.S. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Also here in the studios, we'd like to appreciate the head of the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy at Bayes University. That's Dr. Matthew O'Malley. Dr. O'Malley, thank you for being our guest. And of course, Malam Garba Shehu, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, who's just got back with the President from the U.S. Thank you for being our guest on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. All right, that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We appreciate your being with us. Join us again tomorrow for a fresh package of the program. Same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. But do not forget to wish my co-presenter, Nadabo, happy birthday, because today we welcome him formally to the 6th floor. Nadabo, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Many happy returns.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank
I'm
you
Kingsley Osadolo.
And of course, I'm Yusuf Nadabo Suman. Thank you so very much for this well-spent time with you, and of course, for this great journey all this while. It's my pleasure.